welcome to the Link Online. And we're back once again with another program of news and items about and from Canada. And we just want to say hello to all our listeners tuning in on World Radio Paris and the shortwave service from Germany and Kauri 97.5 FM radio in Nigeria. And I'm here in studio once again with my good buddies Terry Haig.
Hey.
Lavon Savance.
Hey.
And in the control booth today we have Chantal Saint-Sauveur, Benoît Durand, and Capitaine Pierre. He's in charge. We're approaching Christmas, so he's our fairy elf.
Elfish, yes, he is an
guy.
elf. Yeah, he's got an elf-like quality about him.
He's the
I've
one with
always
the
thought
presents.
that.
In other words, he's the one who hands out the pencils when you run out of, because I have.
He does everything. We've said this
pencil.
before. This place grinds to a halt.
Without him, I tell you.
You got to give him his name. You forgot to say his name.
Pierre Tutil.
Oh, okay.
Which is sort of similar to utile in French.
That's right.
Which is useful. So he's Pierre, who's very useful. Mm-hmm. Pierre, who is utile. There he is.
And I'm married to his cousin, you know.
You are?
Yeah.
Somebody married you?
Yeah. It's the same family.
Wow.
Yeah. I am.
Anyway, on to serious subjects today because we do have a lot of interesting information, as I said, from and about Canada. And we'll start with you, Terry. How about that?
Oh, we start with me? Okay.
I'm going to start with you today.
Okay. And what's the question?
Your item today.
Trees. Saving the world.
All right. And there are lots of them, apparently.
You need a lot of them.
Okay. We'll find out more, I expect, anon.
Wow. You do need a lot of them to save the world.
Moving right along with my friend Lavon here, who has a serious international story.
Yeah,
of course.
My subject, as usual, is pretty serious. It's about this worsening situation in Mali, and I'll talk to a Canadian humanitarian worker who has written a report on it for Refugees International.
Okay, and because this is Christmas, and I should point out this is our last broadcast before Christmas, and we'll be back in the new year, but this is the last show before Christmas, so take that as you will, I suppose. The subject that I have for you, because it is Christmas, there's going to be a lot of people giving gifts, obviously, the next few days, and some of them will be these so-called smart speakers. But wait. There are things you should know about these smart speakers that you may not. Find out about that coming up.
Oh my God, that's right. You told me about that.
Are they also smart listeners?
They're smart listeners, yes. Maybe not so smart, but anyway. And of course, we'll find out more about that coming up on this edition of The Link Online. All right, Lavon, we're going to start off with your story. And once again, this is a very serious international story and concerning humanitarian aid. Tell us what's going on about that.
Well, Mark, aid agencies are warning that Mali is on a very perilous course. They say nearly 8 years after the conflict began, or after the international community got involved there, things are getting worse instead of getting better. The international community is still focused on stabilization and counterterrorism, and the providing of the humanitarian aid is not getting enough attention. The conflict itself seems to be spreading now to areas that used to be stable, and the aid agencies, the United Nations, they have to deal now with 3.28 million people in need in Mali. And I spoke with a Canadian humanitarian worker. Her name is Alexandra Lamarche, and she had just recently visited Mali and wrote a report for Refugees International. And she says that the situation there and the aid efforts are getting hindered by this worsening security crisis, and it doesn't look like it's going to get any better anytime soon.
There is a massive discrepancy. What we're seeing is that the military response, including the G5 Sahel, including MINUSMA, which is the peacekeeping mission, including the French operation, gets about $2 billion a year. And what we're seeing is that there only $160 million has been provided for the humanitarian funding, which is about 50% of what it needs for the year. Obviously, we're coming to the end of the year, and there will be a new appeal with a new figure as to what they require for 2020. And we're hoping to get more international engagement on the humanitarian side. We need to be dealing dealing with these human, consequences to the conflict. We need to be dealing with this widespread marginalization and the lack of access to basic services, which is only going to further breed marginalization, which could obviously further fuel conflict and tension and competition over scarce resources. But it's extremely disheartening to see how much is being spent on the military side with little success, I would say. $2 billion a year is massive compared to the $324 million that's requested for the humanitarian side that is barely getting the attention and funding that it needs.
But some people would say you're in a catch-22 situation here because you cannot spend on humanitarian side if there is no security. You're not going to be able to deploy government resources. You won't even be able to deploy humanitarian agencies if the situation is not secured. So how do you square that circle?
It's an excellent question, and I think it's everything needs to be done in parallel. I'm not here to say that the security aspect is wrong or not doing its job. I think that it's doing its best in a very, very vast country that is extremely, extremely dangerous, especially for the peacekeeping side. I mean, this is the deadliest peacekeeping mission for the UN. There's been 200 peacekeepers that have lost their lives as a result of this conflict. It is obviously extremely difficult. I think that how there's a bit of a difference in how humanitarian organizations operate in insecure contexts, how they can gain access, which can be done even in the most insecure of environments. I definitely think that more needs to be done on the security agenda, but everything needs to be done in tandem. We need to be further funding humanitarian organizations to give them the tools to operate in such a, very, very volatile context. To wait for it to be secure to provide humanitarian funding only means that people will go without basic services, and more people will unfortunately pay the price, whether they are just lacking food or access to livelihoods. But there's more people will die, unfortunately, and we can't sort of have that responsibility lying on our hands. We need to be doing more.
And that was an excerpt of my interview with Alexandra Lamarche. She's a Canadian humanitarian worker who works for Refugees International, and she's the author of a report called Mali's Humanitarian Crisis. You can listen to our full interview on our webpage, or you can also download it if you are subscribed to our podcast and listen to it that way.
Mm-hmm. And of course, if you go to the website webpage, you can download the app there as well to get all the stuff. And if you visit the site and you visit one of these stories, take a look at some of the other interesting stories that are there as well, because we have a whole history of very interesting subjects to look at. So, once you've looked at the story you're dealing with there, try taking a cruise through some of the other stories as well.
And maybe some of the other language sections as well. I mean, don't forget, we have stories in 5 languages.
English, French, Spanish, Arabic, and Mandarin. Yeah. Now, the situation with Mali, that's been going on for decades, hasn't it?
Well, I mean,
it flared up a little while ago.
It flared up in I started in 2010, and then 2012 and 13. That's when it got really bad, when the country was almost run over by this alliance of rebels that had allied themselves to jihadist groups. France got involved, and then the international community got involved. The Mali's neighbors, the 5 Sahel countries got involved. And the thing is that it's now spreading. Alexander was talking about how it's spreading to now the more stable parts of the country, but it's also spreading to the neighboring countries. So you have now Burkina Faso and Niger that are getting affected by this conflict as well. So
part of that is because there's so many displaced people moving into those areas as well, right?
Yeah, so you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who've been displaced by this conflict. If I remember correctly, the Sahel region, so you are talking about Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, has close to 1 million people who've been displaced. And so some of these people are internally displaced. Some of these people are forced to seek shelter in neighboring countries. So you have Malians who cross into Burkina Faso or who cross into Niger and vice versa. So it's a very, very difficult humanitarian situation. And as she said, the focus has been on funding the kind of the counterinsurgency operation to stabilize, because so far what the international community has been able to achieve, she says, is get this relatively secure situation around Bamako, which is the capital of Mali. But the rest of the country is pretty much under, the government at least doesn't control it very well, and you have this peacekeepers, and it's the deadliest peacekeeping operation for many years. I think there are in excess of 200 peacekeepers who have been killed in Mali. So it's a very, very complex situation, and it's underfunded. She was talking about what's $300-something million that Mali needed for this year. We're in coming to the end of December. That number has been funded only by half. So even the little that they spend on humanitarian situation doesn't get funded properly.
Terry,
How much does how much do the borders mean, or is it like the Middle East? That's the result of colonialism and Europe carving it up, so the borders don't really mean that much, right? As far as tribes go and the ethnic part of it all.
Yeah,
go.
I mean it's exactly that. I mean you have Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, former French colonies. The borders are pretty.
They don't have anything to do with reality.
Arbitrary, because you have, for example, the Tuareg, which is one of the larger ethnic groups in the Sahel region that doesn't have its own statehood, but they're spread over the entire region. So they want more autonomy. Some of them are seeking full independence. You have dozens of other ethnic groups, and now you have also these jihadist forces that allied with Al-Qaeda and more recently with the so-called Islamic State, coming in and taking advantage of this situation and confusion. And it's kind of like a perpetuum mobile. It's itself generates more instability, which generates even more instability. And so unless something dramatic is done to help the humanitarian situation, to show people on the ground that they have a stake in maintaining security. Because for a lot of these young people, I mean, the state isn't doing very much for them. So there comes either the rebel groups or the jihadist groups, and they say, we'll help you. This is how things should be done. Look at this corrupt government. And it's very easy to get these people on your side if there is no government, if the international community is not building capacity, is not helping on the ground, and all they see is people in foreign uniforms coming to patrol their country.
Well, as always, if you want more information on this, you can go to the website and you'll get it by looking at that story to begin with, and then you can research some of the other stories, because this is a story that we've dealt with in the past as well. So there's lots of information there. And coming up on the program now, we're going to take a look at an environmental story with Terry Haig.
All right.
Christmas music for you there as we approach Christmas. And once again, this is our last broadcast, or netcast, I suppose you'd say, before Christmas. Now, Terry, you did a story this week about something that if people actually do it, it might go at least partway towards helping this climate change and global warming problem that is growing and becoming more serious all the time.
Well, during the election campaign for the October 21st vote, Prime Minister Trudeau, he was Liberal leader Trudeau at that point, promised to spend 3 billion beans on land and water conservation projects, including planting 2 billion additional trees before 2030, that's billion, to help Canada meet its Paris Climate Agreement goals, by capturing it. And so people are going, 2 billion trees, are you going to do it, right? So, but, a think tank, the Smart Prosperity Institute, named after me, of course, at the University of Ottawa. Did a study on it, and it's feasible. It's really feasible, and it's doable to plant 2 billion trees, and that would reduce emissions between 2 and 4 million tons a year in 2030. That could be double by 2050 as the trees get bigger and capture more carbon. So that's about 5% of the additional emissions targets that Canada needs to cut in order to meet its Paris climate targets. Now, I spoke to the co-author of the report, Dave Sawyer. He's an environmental economist. I asked him what has to be done to make the idea into a reality.
There's a lot of forest science to go down. It has to happen. And I'm not a forest scientist, right? We sort of took a look at the literature that the forest scientists put out there and say, okay, is this feasible? Can we plant this many trees? So that was the first thing we looked at. So annually, we harvest about a billion hectares of trees, and this proposal works out to be planting about 1 billion hectares of trees over 10 years. So that puts it into scale for you. So when you look at those sort of numbers, we're already planting a lot of trees. We're basically planting that many trees on an annual basis to replace, what we've harvested. So it doesn't, this proposal doesn't look really offside with what we're already doing.
Okay, but I mean, the thing is, environmentalists keep saying it's not a magic bullet, and yet, everywhere around the world, that Swiss study, the study by the guy in Switzerland, over 1 trillion trees. I mean, it does appear somehow to be a magic bullet. So what makes me wonder is, who's the opposition going to be, do you figure?
Well, so, I mean, to go to these deep reduction targets, these decarbonization targets, we're talking about net zero by 2050, reversing dangerous climate change by 2050. We're going to have to basically squeeze, fossil fuel out of our energy use. And then we're going to have to do other stuff to basically reduce sort of the ongoing problem we have in the atmosphere. And really trees help with that quite a bit. Natural capital helps with that quite a bit. So we really need a portfolio of measures. And anytime somebody says to you, oh, this magic bullet is going to solve the climate problem, they really don't understand the complexity. So all that to say, yeah, we got to be planting trees. We got to be, driving EVs. We have to have cap and trade like Quebec has. We have to invest in clean energy, need more electricity coming out of Quebec into the U.S. So, yeah, we need a whole portfolio. And it's just really good to see this trees being added to that portfolio.
That's part of my conversation with Dave Sawyer, an environmental economist who prepared a report on the idea of planting 2 billion trees in Canada by 2030. He prepared the report for the Smart Property Institute at the University of Ottawa. And that report I referred to about the Swiss report was Thomas Crowther, okay? ETH Zurich, or some people say Zurich, but there it is. It's online. It's in the story, in fact. There's a link to that report. And he says it's possible. 1.2 trillion trees would go a long way. Now, how much is a trillion? Is a trillion 100 billion, 10 billion, 1,000 billion? Do any of you guys know? Do you guys know how much a trillion
It's a lot.
I think it's 1,000 billion.
1,000 billion? Okay. That's a lot of trees, but we better get on it.
Well, the
We
thing
better get on it, folks.
the thing about this plan is, if you saw the pictures that were shown there, they were planting coniferous trees, and if you're planting just one kind of tree, I don't think that's really a good idea, because the trees that we're losing are a mixed forest type of thing.
Of course, for sure.
But it's easy to plant. It's easy to plant those kind of trees, the coniferous trees, but is that a wise idea to plant only those kind of trees?
No, obviously not, Montgomery, if you want to be a nudge like that. But
this is the thing, because don't forget, we have at least that many trees being destroyed by the mountain pine beetle, which is making its way eastward,
There's no talking to him, Levon? Hey, you try to do something positive, and Montgomery comes up
But
with...
he's right. I remember from my first job in Canada, planting trees? Yes, in northern Ontario. And you walk around this clear-cut forest, and you look around and you see that there was dozens of different species.
Yeah.
But we were planting only 2 varieties, red pine and white pine.
Yeah.
So the industry that invests in replanting, they're not interested in some shrubs and things. They want something that they're going to go back 30, 40 years after and be able to harvest again. So we really have to think of not only planting the trillion trees, but planting trillion biodiversity trees.
Mixed trees.
mix-
Because don't forget, the animals don't just like coniferous trees, right? There are different animals that
Okay, but if we know this, they know this, right?
Well, you'd be surprised.
you're dealing with the government.
No, but you'd be surprised how much pressure a lobby group can put on the government and say, you know what, we're going to create thousands of forestry jobs in the future or sustain the forestry jobs that we have here only if we plant the right kinds of trees.
Of
And
interest to the industry.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Okay, boys.
And it's like, look, the same thing with the palm oil trees. I mean, these are trees, but we're destroying whole forests, mixed rainfall forests, to plant just one variety of trees.
Yeah. This is
Boy, you guys are a real up. Let me tell you, it's really a pleasure to deal with. But I'm leaving. I've had enough of this negative stuff. All right? I'm leaving. Okay. Since you insist, I'll stay. Okay.
stay. We have some good we have some good Christmas music coming up.
Oh, good. I'll bet it's folk music, like that folk music you always play. You know, like
Chantal, who's a great technician who has been with the show for decades.
Don't say that. You don't say that about somebody.
Well, we've been here for decades. She has chosen some wonderful theme music for us.
Oh, she has?
Chantal, if you please.
She played Deck the Halls. Get a camera in there, eh? Okay. Our ratings would go right through the roof.
Well, because, they have a choice of looking at us or looking
That's
in,
right.
All right. As mentioned, this is the last show before Christmas break, and this weekend, millions of people will be out shopping for gifts. Probably among all those gifts will be plenty of these tech devices called smart speakers. Now, the thing is, these are speakers that are connected to the internet and to virtual digital assistants like Siri and Alexa and names like that. And while these things are considered to be helpful, there are some things that people should be aware of, that they are also gathering all kinds of information on your private information
Alexa,
about,
what
your likes, your where you're going and this kind of thing. And it all adds up after a while. But also, they might be collecting information that you don't even think they should be collecting. Now, I spoke with Jordan Pearson in Toronto, and he is a senior editor at Motherboard. That is a tech news site from Vice Media. And in this excerpt, he explains exactly what this variety of smart speakers are.
Basically, every company from Amazon to Google to Apple and more are putting these devices out there that are basically little speakers, but they're not just speakers, actually. They're more like microphones, and that's important to keep in mind. We call them smart speakers, but really they're smart microphones. So you're putting a microphone in your house that sends recordings of your voice to the corporation that manufactured it. And these will allow you to do things like play music, set alarms, check the weather, Google things, order stuff through food delivery services, really anything you can imagine doing with a personal assistant such as Alexa, or even Siri is helpful to think about here. Anything you can do with these is basically in a speaker that is always on, always listening for you to say a particular key phrase that will basically activate the recording feature and send the information back.
So if you have an argument with somebody or whatever, it's recording it. And what's the concerns about privacy here?
Well, it's important to note that while these speakers are always on, so they're always listening, they're not always recording. And that is basically the idea, is to make it so that if you're arguing with someone or having an intimate moment or whatever, that it won't necessarily pick that up. But we've seen this over and over again where accidental activations are definitely a thing, and they happen. We don't really have visibility on how often we happen, but we know that they do. And for these unintentional activations that are picking up like really sensitive stuff, what people will probably find really creepy is that these conversations have the potential to be sent to a contractor, which is just a normal person, not working for very much money, in what is effectively a call center, and they're listening to your conversation, thousands of them actually, and transcribing them, writing them down. So I think for most people, that's going to be a big creep factor that isn't, there's a reason why that's not on the box, because I think people, if they really sat down and understood how these things work, they would be, I think, justifiably a little creeped out.
I read something recently where one of the top executives of Google or something said that if you're holding a party in your house and you have these devices, you should tell people before they get in the house that you have these devices. And I presume there's a legal implication for that, is there? Or what's the situation there?
I mean, there's legal implications that are in the mix whenever you have one of these things in your house, even if it's just you. We've already seen how, police have requested Amazon Alexa recordings in a court case. So absolutely, that's in the mix, and that's just one more of these implications of even just having one of these things in your house that, it's not on the box, and it's not something you'd think about necessarily. But these implications spin out in such a way that's just, it's mind-boggling to think that the courts could have access to this beyond just the corporation, which you don't even think about normally anyway. Although I will say that if you're at the point where you are warning people who come into your house that you have a surveillance device in there, maybe you shouldn't have it in your house. Like, if you just buy one of these things, set them up in your house, the default is like max surveillance. And I think that's the point. So if you get one of these, go into the privacy settings, read the agreement, familiarize yourself as much as you can, and get to a comfortable level.
And that was my conversation with Jordan Pearson in Toronto. He's senior editor at Motherboard, which is a tech news site from Vice Media. And the full conversation, of course, is on our website. So something to think about if you have one of these devices. Now, one of the interesting thing he said is some of this information telling you about this stuff is in that user agreement. But by the same token, both he and a lot of other people have said these user agreements, who reads them? Yeah. They're deliberately, I heard a lawyer say they're deliberately designed to be obtuse and difficult to read so that nobody reads them.
No, so the lawyers make a living.
Yeah, he said even the lawyers have trouble understanding what these things mean. So, but Jordan Pearson says at least try to figure out what the security levels are on these machines that you can set them to at a comfort level that you're.
This is creepy, Montgomery. It's totally creepy.
Well, it's this is high tech. I mean, they follow you on your cell phones when you.
That's creepy.
When you use stuff on these search engines, they know what you're searching for, or they know who you are.
And who are these people that are transcribing it like a call center? They're transcribing everything that. What are they just transcribing? Everything we think.
The conversations.
The conversations we have.
Yeah, and it's
at
all
home.
It's all gathered in data.
Man.
It's all gathered in data.
At that big place in Utah, with the NSA or whatever it is.
It's called the Big Brother.
The Big Brother.
Well, the thing is, at least at NSA, these are government employees who are probably getting a bit better paid than somebody sitting in a call center working for a bit more than minimum wage or minimum wage. And who knows where this information goes?
Like, where does it go, Levon? You're
well, I mean, I'm just thinking. I mean, if only Soviet Union had survived to the age of internet, KGB would be like all over this stuff.
Oh my God!
Can you imagine what's happening in China?
Well, this is the thing. They have facial recognition. They've got millions of cameras in that country, and they register whether you're happy or not happy. So if you're listening to a speech by some leader and you're not happy, they'll know. Somebody's not happy. And
Merry Christmas, everybody. Wow. All right. Jeez. Whoa.
Develop your poker face.
Develop your poker face. And maybe
don't say a word at home.
Think about what you're doing on the internet and think about what you're saying to these devices and so on and so forth. Now, listen, we're almost out of time, and this is the last show. So before I came in, I quickly jotted down something here.
Okay.
'Twas the last netcast before Christmas, and the hosts of the show were eager to leave as they had to shovel more snow. There's last-minute shopping that still had to be done, with huge credit card bills that we know will soon come. So for myself, Lavon and Terry here at the desk, and technicians Chantal, Benoit, and Pierre, who are the best, we wish you all a Merry Christmas, and to all take care. We'll be back in 2020, so join us there.
Very, very, very nice.